The rules of the Jade Coffin. The city didn't sleep, it simmered. Outside the heavy, closed gates, Hong Kong was a relentless symphony of kinetic energy. Trams ringing, hawkers calling, the air thick with the smell of jasmine tea and sea salt. Yet here, tucked away on a forgotten slope of a mid-level cemetery hill, the Tung Phuc Tong Funeral Home stood as a monolith of absolute silence. It was a place of granite and deep shadow, resisting the tropical clamor with a terrifying finality. Everyone said I was insane to take the job. They spoke of the mortuary in hushed tones, calling it the Cold House, a place with roots deeper than the colonial-era banyans that clawed at its walls. But for me, Lee Wai, a medical school dropout drowning in debt, the money was irresistible. The nocturnal silence, the lack of human interaction, and the surprisingly substantial salary were the perfect narcotic for my shame and desperation. I was 22, and my new life would begin when the city's life retreated. On that first sweltering evening, the humidity clinging to my shirt like a shroud, I met Mr. Mack. The proprietor was a thin, imposing man dressed in a dark, traditional changshan. His face was a landscape of deep-set wrinkles, and his eyes, dark and flat like polished obsidian, held a knowledge that seemed to predate the building itself. When he spoke, his voice was a dry, brittle whisper that barely disturbed the oppressive air. "This is not a hospital, Lee Wai," Mr. Mack said, leading me through the labyrinthine halls. "The bodies here are already at rest. We merely facilitate that rest." The tour was chillingly brief. The preparation room, sterile and smelling faintly of chemicals and old incense. The ancestral shrine, where rows of photographs watched us with vacant intensity. And finally the chilling chamber, the heart of the operation. It was a cavern of stainless steel and brilliant, uncompromising fluorescent light. The cold hit me like a physical blow, a stark antiseptic contrast to the sticky heat outside. "Your duties are simple," he stated, his breath fogging slightly in the cold air. "From 10 until 6, monitor the chamber's temperature, meticulously log every hour, and prepare any new arrivals before Aling begins the morning shift." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the rows of numbered steel lockers. "You must be diligent, especially between 3 and 4 a.m. This is the time when the veil is thinnest, the hour of the dark beast. Look not into the shadows of that hour, for something often looks back." He presented me with a thick, yellowed piece of parchment, protected by a modern layer of plastic lamination. The list was handwritten in elegant, precise Chinese characters, each stroke imbued with solemn weight. "These are the rules of Tung Phuc Tong," Mr. Mack said, his tone dropping to a guttural register. "They are not suggestions, Lee Wai. They are an ancient pact, earned by those who paid the toll before you. To violate them is to invite consequence greater than death." My fingers trembled as I took the document, the laminated edges surprisingly cold. The rules were numbered oddly, with noticeable gaps, as if others had been erased or were too terrible to be written down. 1. Never, under any circumstance, extinguish the lights within the chilling chamber. The darkness is not our friend. 2. Never converse with the lingering spirits. Do not acknowledge whispers, pleas, or calls for help. Your deafness is your defense. 3. On moonless nights, Thursdays on the lunar calendar, the 7th locker is sealed. It must not be approached, touched, or opened. 4. Always wear the provided silk gloves when tending to the bodies. Direct contact is a perilous transfer. 5. Never remain unassisted after 3 a.m. If the security guard, Ming, has not arrived, you must sit in the office until dawn. 7. If a rapping is heard after 10, emanating from the street door, you are deaf to it. Do not answer. It is never a client. 8. It was labeled X on the parchment. Should the office phone toll precisely at midnight, you must lift the receiver before the 3rd ring. You must listen. 9. Should your name be uttered 3 times in succession, Lee Wai, Lee Wai, Lee Wai, you must not turn your head or your attention. You have not heard it. 12. Written below a noticeable smear. A pinch of red sand, sea salt mixed with dried plum dust for protection, must always be in your pocket, always. I looked up, my throat dry, my initial desperation for money warring with a primal, rising terror. These are for ghosts, sir?" Mr. Mack didn't smile, but his eyes conveyed a terrible amusement. "Ghosts are the least of your worries, Lee Wai. There are things here that predate the concept of a ghost. things that feed on broken protocol and the fear of the living. We are custodians of the veil, and the rules are the only thing that holds it shut. He turned to leave, his long Changshan whispering against the marble floor. Remember this, he called back over his shoulder, the final words echoing down the desolate corridor. The dead do not always rest in peace, and sometimes they seek company. Then I was alone, surrounded by silence, the scent of fear, and the cold, indifferent gaze of the sealed steel lockers. I desperately needed the money, and now I had the rules. The toll, I knew, was already due. The midnight toll and the triplicate call. My first night began not with terror, but with crushing boredom. The clock tower outside, usually muffled by the city's noise, sounded its metallic, lonely chimes. I sat in the cramped office, filling out the temperature log with meticulous, almost obsessive care. The cold that permeated the walls was a silent, suffocating presence. I needed the money, I reminded myself. I needed the silence. Around 11 p.m., driven by a nervous energy, I made my required check of the chilling chamber. I approached the rows of gleaming reflective steel. When I reached locker number 7, a faint, irrational prickle ran down my spine. It was only Tuesday, a safe night, according to Rule 3, yet the sheer weight of the impending warning, moonless nights do not open, made the locker feel heavier, colder than the rest. I recorded the temperature and retreated quickly, not wanting to linger. The atmosphere tightened precisely at midnight. The telephone on the desk, an ancient rotary model, shrieked. My whole body seized. Rule 8, toll precisely at midnight. Lift the receiver before the third ring. 1. The sound was jarring, an intrusion on the absolute quiet. 2. I lunged, snatching the receiver off the cradle just as the mechanism prepared for the third, fatal ring. Tung Fuk Tong. Li Wai is listening, I managed, the words catching in my throat. There was a profound, deafening silence on the line. I strained my ear, pressing the receiver tightly. I heard only the static hum of the open connection. Then, a noise so delicate it might have been my own panicked imagination, a faint, sub-audible breath. It was not a mechanical sound. It was alive, or once alive. Hello? Is anyone there? I urged, trying to sound professional. The sound of the breath seemed to retract. Then the line severed with a sharp click. My heart hammered against my ribs. It must have been Ming, the night guard, or Ah Ling, playing a sick practical joke. But the utter, ancient quiet that returned to the office suggested nothing of human prankery. The hour of the dark beast, the mundane quiet held until 2 a.m. I was performing a routine temperature check when the disquiet began. A faint, repetitive scratching sound. It was distinct, like a dry fingernail dragging across slate, and it came from inside the chilling chamber. I swallowed, telling myself it was the ancient plumbing, or perhaps the expansion and contraction of the steel in the deep cold. I used my heavy key to open the door. The chamber was still, cold, and utterly silent. The fluorescence gave everything a stark, unforgiving sheen. Then a whisper. It was light as the rustle of funeral silk, yet it seemed to fill the vast space. It came from Locker 4, a temporary resident, a young woman who had taken her own life the day before. Li Wai. My blood turned to ice. Rule 2. Never converse with the lingering spirits. I stood frozen, my rational mind screaming at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the floor. Li Wai, help me. The voice was laced with an unbearable, desperate sadness, tugging at the remaining empathy I possessed. I clenched my fists, invoking the rule like a prayer. Deafness, I am deaf. Then the final, terrifying escalation. The voice sharpened, becoming less plaintive, more demanding. The name was uttered with rapid, deliberate malice, as if to pierce the final barrier of my resolve. Li Wai, Li Wai, Li Wai. The triplicate calling. My instincts took over. I broke contact, spinning on my heel, slamming the heavy steel door behind me with a thunderous clang. The last syllable of my name, Why? Nin, seemed to chase me down the hallway, less a plea and more a possessive decree. It is too late. The red sand and the guard, panting, leaning against the hallway wall, a tall, uniformed figure emerged silently from the dense shadows near the back loading bay. Ming, the night security guard. He wasn't old, but his face carried a permanent expression of heavy resignation. I heard a cry, he stated, his voice flat and grave. A sudden noise from the chamber. You heard voices from within? I did not answer, I gasped, invoking Rule 2 again, terrified he might think I was mad. Ming merely nodded, his eyes scanning the corridor ceiling. Good. Never answer, he then looked pointedly at his watch. It is past 3 a.m. He checked the front doors, his movements slow and deliberate, a figure of methodical, unsettling calm. He carried a small, heavy white linen pouch clutched in his left hand. What is that? I asked, indicating the bag. Red sand, he replied, turning to me with a strange mix of pity and warning. Rule 12. Always carry red sand. If you have any sense, you'll carry enough to build a circle around yourself. You'll understand when you truly need it. He walked with me, his presence a heavy, necessary anchor against the suffocating cold. The hour of the dark beast, he murmured. We walk together now, Li Wai. Rule 5. No work alone after 3 a.m. His gaze held a depth that confirmed my fear. He didn't just guard the building, he guarded me against things that sought to breach the rules, things that watched, and things that had already called my name. The custodians of the Veil and Kwok's toll, the lingering fear from the previous night, the ghostly Li Wai, Li Wai, Li Wai, had curdled in my stomach by morning. When Ah Ling arrived, her kind, weary eyes seemed to confirm my madness. I couldn't bear the isolation anymore. I cornered her in the quiet austerity of the preparation room. The scent of chemicals and age-old incense thick in the air. Ah Ling, I whispered, my voice cracked from lack of sleep. Tell me the truth about this place. Mak Kin, the rules. What exactly are we guarding? She paused her methodical folding of burial shrouds, her gaze distant. The rules are not for amusement, Li Wai. They are defenses, she repeated, her tone hardening. She confirmed the local whispers. Tung Fuk Tong was built atop something ancient, something that resented the weight of the living. Mr. Mack, she said, lowering her voice, he doesn't just manage a mortuary. His family are the custodians of the Veil. They hold the line between the city of the living and what feeds from beneath. She then told me about the fate of my predecessor, a man named Kwok. He was, she said, a modern man, a skeptic. He found the list of rules archaic. He reasoned that Rule 3, the one about the 7th locker on moonless nights, was superstition designed to frighten new staff. Ah Ling recounted. One Thursday night, driven by arrogance or curiosity, Kwok deliberately opened Locker 7. We found him the next morning, Li Wai. Sealed inside, she stated, her breath catching. He wasn't dead. He was empty. His skin was cold, his eyes were open, but everything vital, his soul, his life force, his very essence, it had been meticulously, cleanly sucked out. The body was just a shell. The chamber took its toll. Kwok's final, silent resting place was that cursed cabinet, a grim warning etched into the mortuary's history. The unsettling arrival of the jade coffin. The clock moved with terrifying swiftness. Checking my phone's calendar, I saw the dread. Tomorrow was Thursday, a moonless night. The memory of Kwok's fate, of his drained shell inside that specific locker, made my heart beat a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My mounting terror was realized that night at 11 p.m. The office phone, the old rotary relic, screamed. I lifted it before the first full ring, hoping to preempt whatever curse accompanied the midnight toll. The voice on the other end was not Max. It was mechanical, metallic, and devoid of warmth, sounding like a recording played from the bottom of a well. Prepare Locker 7. The jade coffin arrives in 15 minutes. The phrase jade coffin struck me like a physical blow. Ah Ling had mentioned them, the special clients whose deaths were not mundane, but ritualistic, or who carried something terrifyingly ancient. They were always destined for the most dangerous vessel, and they always preceded a night of maximum danger. I immediately radioed Ming, the night guard, his presence now my only anchor to the sane world. 15 minutes later, the hearse arrived. Two huge men in funereal black deposited a single, unusually heavy body bag on the gurney. The file they provided was criminally sparse. Mei Yin, 27. Cause of death. Undetermined. Nothing more. No family contact, no address, just the name and the age, as if she had materialized from the fog. The vessel of ancient hunger. Ming unzipped the bag just enough. My blood ran cold, fear overriding my training. Mei Yin was startlingly beautiful, but in a way that defied the reality of death. Her skin was a translucent, pristine white, like the finest porcelain. Her lips, however, were stained a peculiar, intense cerulean blue, a color that spoke of neither natural cold nor simple poisoning, but something older and deeply unnatural. "Do not look," Ming hissed, his hand clamping down on my shoulder. "Never speak her name in here. She is a vessel. Whatever is contained within her, or whatever she is carrying, is what the rules are for." We sealed the bag quickly, the zipper sounding like a final, desperate admission of guilt. With agonizing care, we positioned her within Locker 7. The moment the stainless steel door swung shut and the heavy latch clicked, the change in the atmosphere was palpable. It wasn't just the temperature dropping further, it was the density of the air, the absolute silence that swallowed every other sound. It was the feeling of a heavy, ancient weight finally settling into its rightful place. As we hurried away, Ming and I both stopped dead. Faintly through the insulated door of the chamber, we heard it. A low, humming, profoundly melancholic song. It was a woman's voice, a lament, sung in a tongue that sounded older than the stones of the building, instantly confirming Ah Ling's words. Ming's face was drawn tight with grim certainty. "It is done. The jade coffin is in place." He pointed at the lunar calendar on the wall. "Tonight, she is contained. Tomorrow, moonless night, she is active. Now, Li Wai," he warned, his voice a low growl of absolute finality. "You forget the song, you forget her face. You do not, under any circumstance, go near that cabinet." The wait had begun. The broken edict. The dread that had simmered for the past 2 days now boiled over. The silence of the moonless night was not peaceful. It was a profound, suffocating absence of sound, as if the entire district were holding its breath. The lights in the chilling chamber flickered incessantly, making the polished steel lockers seem to writhe. Ming, the night guard, was a picture of tightly coiled tension, checking the window every 15 minutes, his knuckles white around his pouch of red sand. He left at 4 a.m., his usual departure time, but his parting was weighted with a terrible finality. "Do not move from the office, Li Wai. Build a circle, a wall of the sand, around your chair if you feel anything shift. The jade coffin is a lure. Do not become its vessel." I sat alone, paralyzed. Just before midnight, Mr. Mack arrived. A rare event, his face like carved stone, his eyes burning with an almost manic intensity. "Li Wai," he stated, his voice low and dangerous. "You know the rule for the moonless night." He repeated the warning, his fingers stabbing at the laminated list on the desk. "You do not approach, touch, or open Locker 7. Even if the voice of your mother begs you to, do you understand?" He departed without waiting for an answer. At 11:45 p.m., the rotary phone rang. I answered instantly. This time, the voice was not Max or Ming's. It was thin, reedy, and ancient. "She is stirring," the voice whispered, rasping like dried leaves. "She needs aid." "You must open the locker and release her." I slammed the receiver down, my entire body shaking. "Rule 3! Rule 3!" But then the sound began. Not the delicate scratch of the previous night, but a light, persistent rapping from within the chilling chamber. It escalated quickly into a frantic, rhythmic pounding against the steel of Locker 7. Then, the voice of Mei Yin, a woman's desperate, suffocated plea, laced with a terrifying realism. "Please, someone, I'm alive. It's too cold. I was sealed here." My rationale instantly fractured. Kwok's fate was terrifying. But the thought of leaving a living human to freeze to death, my medical training, my basic humanity, screamed at me. I stood up. A life is at stake. I grabbed the heavy key and rushed to the chamber. "I'm sorry," I called out, my voice cracking with guilt and fear as I reached the cabinet. "I'm not permitted to open this cabinet. I can call for help." The human cry instantly ceased. An awful, profound silence descended. Then, a deep, terrifying voice, not the soft whisper of a victim, but the commanding roar of a hunter, emanated from inside the steel box. "Then we shall egress by another means, Li Wai." A sudden, icy blast erupted from the seams of Locker 7. The fluorescent lights above exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the chamber into terrifying semi-darkness, illuminated only by the emergency exit signs. The hunter and the salt ring. I turned to flee, but it was too late. A figure stood blocking the doorway, a woman in a stained white shroud, her long, wet black hair concealing her face, the outline of her body seeming to waver in the sparse light. She moved with impossible gliding speed, her feet never seeming to touch the floor. She raised her head. It was the flawless pale face of Mei Yin, but her eyes were gone, replaced by two voids of absolute blackness that seemed to drink the remaining light. Her blue-stained lips curled into a sickening, triumphant smile. "You broke the rule," she rasped, her voice inhuman, echoing with multiple frequencies. "You conversed. You listened. You are ours now." Instinct took over. I ripped the pouch of red sand from my pocket, invoking Rule 12. With a desperate cry, I flung a handful of the salt and plum mixture directly at the figure. A blood-curdling, non-human shriek tore through the air, vibrating in my chest. Mei Yin's body contorted violently, recoiling as if struck by fire, her porcelain skin momentarily smoking where the sand hit. I seized the second of agony and fled, slamming the heavy chamber door and sprinting to the office. I threw the last of the red sand in a frantic circle around my desk and barricaded the door with a heavy filing cabinet. I called Mr. Mack, my words tumbling out in a hysterical stream. "She is out. Mei Yin is in the chamber. I broke the rule. Do not move. Do not speak." His voice thundered over the line, devoid of his usual dry reserve. "Sprinkle the red sand. Do not breach the salt ring. I am coming, but it will take minutes. Do not look at the door." I huddled within the fragile, porous line of protection. Then the sound began. A soft, intimate knocking on the office door. Knock, knock, knock. "Lee, why?" The voice crooned, soft now, deceptively feminine. "Open the door." I only wish to speak. I'm so cold. I shut my eyes, stuffing my fist into my mouth to prevent a scream. "You cannot hide forever. You broke the rule. Now you pay the toll." The knocking ceased, replaced by a slow, deliberate scratching of long, sharp fingernails against the solid wood. Contained, but not safe. Then the clock chimed 3 a.m. The front door of Tung Fuk Tong slammed open with sudden, massive force. Heavy, running footsteps echoed down the hall. Mr. Mack was shouting incomprehensible words, a rapid, rhythmic torrent of an ancient language. There was a sudden, violent sound of impact, a shattering noise followed by a final, unearthly shriek that trailed off into a guttural moan. And then, absolute silence. Mr. Mack stumbled into the office moments later, disheveled, sweating profusely and holding a small, smoking clay talisman. He looked at me, huddled in the salt circle, with cold, terrifying fury. "She is contained," he stated, then looked at me with unmasked contempt. "You did not open the cabinet, no. But you spoke to her. You showed weakness. Rule 2 is broken. You conversed with the spirit." He slumped into a chair, rubbing his temples. "The rules were not written to constrain you, but to protect you, Li Wai," he repeated, his voice heavy with despair. "We were lucky. Do not test fate again." He explained that Mei Yin was an avatar, an ancient hunger that tests the guardians. The salt had momentarily protected me, and his quick use of a powerful warding spell had forced her back into the vessel. We sat together, two terrified men within a simple circle of earth and salt, until the first gray light of dawn touched the grimy office window. As Ah Ling arrived, she found me shaking. She looked at me with knowing eyes. "You saw her," she stated, helping me stand, "and you are still breathing. You are fortunate, Li Wai." I looked at the shredded office door, the lingering cold, and the fear that had been tattooed onto my soul. My debt was paid for now, but I knew this was not over. My connection to the rules and to the chilling presence in Locker 7 had only just begun.